Okay, everyone, welcome to the CHP podcast. My name is Ariana. I will be your host today. I am the director of coaching at CHP, and basically, I'm everywhere, so you probably see me by now. I'm here today with our coach, very long time coach, integral CHP member, creator, and I want to say just backbone, Jonny Pain. He's worked with us for ever and ever. Hello.
Hello. When you're saying that, I'm trying to figure out how long it has been that I've been associated with Alex and you and CHP, and it's over a decade now. Which, when you suddenly ponder it, you think that's actually quite a long time, and I'm honoured for that to be the case. But I also feel old at the same time.
You know, it's crazy when the passage of time is measured in like kind of yearly events that blur into 1 year in your brain, and then you realize that it took place over 8 years, 10 years, and you're like, oh, that wasn't just one very long year
Yeah,
with
this has been a passage of my life.
yeah, sort of like the same. It'll slow down next week. Next week will be easier. Um, but I've brought on Jonny not only because I adore him, but also because I wanted to chat with him about his project he's been working on, what that looks like for those of you who are new to Jonny's endeavor this year, um, and then what his first piece of this project looked like, which was an insane multi-day, multi-stage ultramarathon in the Arctic Circle. Um, I have heard tales of what happened, but I have not been able to speak with Jonny directly about this yet. So, what you hear from Jonny will also be my first time hearing it in detail. So, buckle up because I have a feeling it's going to get really fun. Um, Jonny, can you? We'll skip the general introduction stuff too because I
Yeah.
know that e- everyone knows who you are, and if they want to find out more, they can go to our website and look at your bio.
Mhm.
Um, but in general, over the last few years, you've tackled pretty big ultramarathon efforts, multi-day, multi-stage race efforts. Um, Describe to me your process in arriving at the project you're working on now and what that project looks like and what it doesn't even really have to mean anything to you per se, but just like what drew you to it when it came together.
That last one's always quite hard to answer, but I'll try once we go through the process. The what the process that drew me to the point of this year long project has been actually going back to your very introduction about things feeling like they only took a year and actually taking so much more, has been about 6 years in the making. In the sense that I had done some pretty gnarly ultramarathons, some pretty extreme triathlons, and taken on some huge endeavors really, and came up against failure on three, maybe four in a row. Injury, we kind of ended up developing an inside joke about how broken I was and how easily my legs were breaking and stuff. It was fun and it was funny, but it became kind of something that was like, this can't be the defining feature of me. Is this kind of, well, he tries so hard, but unfortunately he keeps snapping. And I had kind of taken a hiatus, not one not one that was conscious, I don't think, but I hadn't really competed or taken myself through anything organized, I suppose, for about 4 years, barring, and this sounds extreme to throw this in the middle of it, but barring the charity effort that Fergus and I did up Nevis. We climbed, if you remember, Ben Nevis. We were trying to climb it 32 times to create the world's first vertical marathon, so a marathon in gain. But it became so hard that we did only 22 within the time that we'd given ourselves. Anyway, that
Only
was tough.
22.
Only 22. It was brutal and it was tough, but that was the last thing I'd done. And we kind of owned that. It was our own project, and we could kind of stop and start or dig in and dig out. We organized it. So to a degree, I could put the brakes on that at any point. There was no real, well, there was huge risk in terms of what we were doing, but giving yourself over to an organization or a race, or allowing yourself to enter something that's kind of been, that's outside your scope of practice is normally quite hard. And I hadn't done that for some time. So I had dug real deep into the coaching and coached a few people through some really extreme things, and found that the time away from it didn't lessen my will to do it. It actually kind of became stronger and stronger. And then I had, maybe this is an age thing, I don't know. Maybe we're going to go through some therapy here on the podcast. But there had been a kind of a point at which I was thinking, or I was starting to let myself believe that maybe I was past the point of being able to do things that I consider to be up my street. Um, and that stuck in my head as this kind of constant repeating refrain was, "Are you done? Are you done?" And sometimes I would just give in to and go, "Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. You had a good run." And then sometimes I'd be quite aggressive about it, kind of almost beating my chest and saying, "There's no done. I don't give up," and all that kind of macho stuff, or uh, and eventually pulled the trigger. And well, it was quite a large trigger I pulled in the end. I sat down. One of your questions there was kind of, why did I arrive at this particular task? And anybody who's listening is probably thinking, well, what's he banging on about? So I'll contextualize that first. Is that over the course of the year, 2023, trying to complete 4 very extreme ultra marathons in 4 extreme environments. So we'll come back to the Arctic, which I've just done, which was 250 kilometers through the Arctic Circle in 8 weeks' time. So that was, 4 weeks ago, I think I finished that. 8 weeks' time, I have another 250 kilometers through the Peruvian jungle. About 6 weeks after that, I'm in the Tian Shan Mountains in Kyrgyzstan, climbing them. That's another. All of these are 240 kilometers to give you, so I don't have to keep repeating that. And the very last one's through the Namib Desert, Namibia, and I think that's actually a little more than 250 kilometers. But each of these are kind of one extreme after the other. And I guess arriving at that was kind of this shit or bust idea, really, which was kind of looking at it thinking, okay, I can go back, I can do a couple of marathons, maybe do some ultra marathons. And ultra marathons were something that I was enjoying and something that I could do. I felt was in my wheelhouse. I needed to retrain for it and get myself fit again. But did I want to just do another ultra marathon? And here's where the kind of the massive pendulum is that having not completed a few of them, I then thought, well, if I'm really going to go for it, I might as well fucking go for it. So all in, I know some. I'm lucky enough and honored enough to know some people that run things that have been involved in these kind of very extreme adventures. And a good friend of mine, Chris King, runs a company called Beyond the Ultimate, who have this global series of races. And long story short, got in contact with him, asked him if he felt that I was a risk he was willing to take on his races, having not done it for so long. And that's a genuine question, because I don't want to be there and be a problem like, fuck, we'll have to throw a big net around Jonny because he's clearly knackered, breaking, and old. But he felt, much like those around me felt more than I did, that it was something I could do as long as I was, committed to it and had the right support network. And with yourself and Alex and Fergus and the people I have around me, I do have an excellent, an amazing support network. So it was a case of, well, let's do it. And so we're a quarter of the way through. So far, one of one, and successfully completed that. But 3 more to go, and already the next one is looming kind of hard. It's quite a difficult psychological process as well as physical.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. And it is funny because hearing you talk through your process in selecting goals and this project, that there's part of me that's like, wow, that's crazy. But then 90% of me is like, that makes sense. Um, it just makes sense. Um, and I truly understand it too when you get to that point where you get through the self limiter and the limiting beliefs, and then when the path in front of you opens again and you start to consider, if I really focus on doing a lot of work, what is my body capable of? What do I like doing? What could that look like at its most extreme but also most fun? And also probably most miserable simultaneously. But um it's it's really cool how you've pivoted from that place of self-questioning and dealing with some genuinely difficult and persistent injuries. I mean, you shattered your knee, broke your like these weren't small niggles, these weren't
Oh,
small
no, they're
injuries.
big, yeah, yeah,
They're very serious. And just your ability to not only come back from them physically, but also come back from it mentally. Um, I want to say you definitely seem the calmest that you've ever seemed about such large goals, which is actually really cool.
yeah, yeah,
And it's I know that you're probably feeling very not calm about some things, but um, it's it's just really, really, really cool and really impressive to see the way that you've rallied yourself, and it sounds like you've almost like found your joy again, like sort of found yourself again in the training. Um, and I know that I've Alex has been working with you on your training in the buildup of the Arctic and then in continuing. So I've been getting tidbits of information throughout your training with Alex, and like I'll ask for updates, like how's Johnny doing? Your training for the Arctic one also was not free from challenge. I mean, you got very sick at one point,
I did, yeah.
um, like right before the race, um, and I know that in training for something that is that big, there's a lot of questioning and self-doubt that can start to eat away at you. Like you never feel prepared enough
Yeah.
for it, almost because it's so big that you can't possibly recreate it in training. You can't do it in training. So there's always this feeling, it's always unknown kind of looming behind you where you're like, I think I could do it, but what if I can't? So if you could, and you could take this in whatever direction feels the most natural, whether it's the training for it and then, what it looked like, or describing the race in more detail and then talking about your training for it, whatever flows the best. However you want to approach discussing the race and your training, feel free to take it away. Um, yeah, I would just love to touch on your your overall approach to it and training for it, having not done something for so long, and then also probably how much you realized about yourself, that is, if you just continue to move and train a little bit, it's probably a lot more than you think, and your base was probably much better than you thought
Yeah,
going into this.
it really was. That was interesting in of itself. I guess we'll probably jump around a little bit, but just because you give me that little jump off point, we had uh, actually let's drive it back a little bit then and think about the something you mentioned there, and something we were talking about earlier on actually was the kind of reason for choice, and just to sew that up and tie it up a little bit was that, and I mean this without ego or without sounding like a know-it-all or anything, but there was ultra marathons that I could have done, running 100 miles, given a certain amount of time. And we know that ultra runners don't run all that. It's just moving consistently for that amount of distance and time. I knew that was within my wheelhouse. I knew that I could do that. Nevis gave us a little bit of an insight into the fact that I could clearly grind again, and that's something I do well, is just get my head down and keep going. Um, so the question wasn't whether I could tackle an ultra marathon. The question was really, what is it that's going to put the shits up me the most? What's going to frighten me the most? And that's something that I do talk about now and again, as you know, is this kind of leaning into fear, this idea that if it's not frightening you, it probably isn't enough to challenge you in any other way apart from, it would almost be like another training day, wouldn't it? Which is fine. People don't need to kind of push themselves beyond normal or beyond where they're comfortable most of the time. But I do feel like in choosing something, it had to be something that made me think, I don't think I can do that. Or at least my initial response to understanding what the requirements were wouldn't be, well, that seems like something I can tick off. It felt very much from the very start like, oh God, this might be more than I can handle, or this might be something that I don't end up completing, or I might not even get as far as the race. That was a concern we had with this one, or a few times I ran into that idea in my head that I'm not prepared for this, and if I get there, I'll be a bloody nuisance to everybody because everybody else on the starting line is going to be ready, and then this duffer is going to roll up with broken bits and just like a fucking I can't think of an analogy, but
I was gonna
broken.
say, looking like a one of those little kids when they're fully bundled up for the snow, like
Yeah, exactly. Unable to move, but hoping for the best. Smiling, smiling, but not inside. And so I picked it based on the fact, picked this whole challenge based on the fact that it seemed like something that would be so hard, it would be frightening throughout almost, and it's definitely proven to be the case. But so far anyway, but the training itself has been really interesting because, again, you mentioned the base that I may have had is that although I ticked over, I hadn't just kind of lazed about for 4 or 5 years. I'd been training and keeping fit and playing our hybrid game, and making sure that I was kind of covering off what I felt were all the bases that were necessary for me, but never really pushed myself particularly hard. I felt like my aerobic base must still be there, but that was just a hope. So we had to immediately kind of put some kind of training together, and it seemed necessary to me in this challenge to lean into accountability on it as well, which is why Alex has been so useful for me. Not least because he's an amazing coach, and we all know how learned he is and experienced he is on that front, but also because he's a friend, and leaning into that has been really useful because I trust his opinion, and also know that if I was to say something that's not specifically performance related, like I don't, I feel scared, mate. He might have an answer for that as well, which has been very useful for me. So yeah, we had to uncover the kind of aerobic base, and I think Alex had more faith in that than I did. Not least because from the very start I said what I'd like to do with it, simply because of the bandwidth I had, and also just this idea that I thought, well, if I'm going to hand my training over to somebody else, there's no point in me tinkering and trying to interfere with it as a coach myself and meddling too much. I mean, I certainly dig in and say, can we do something different today? But and like everybody else does, report back a week later to say, well, I just maxed out on something, whatever that might be. But for the most part, I wanted him to take control of it so that then I could just get on with doing it, which has actually been massively useful. But one of those things had been this kind of unearthing the data, looking at how quickly my recovery times picked up during certain repeat sessions, and just looking at what my threshold kind of inflection points were and all the rest of it, stuff that I hadn't really done anything but guess on for quite some time. And I expected it all to be awful. And that we had a timeline. Obviously, the first race was February there, and we would get to that point, and maybe 3 weeks or so before, I would have to receive the news from Alex that, look, we've been under the bonnet long enough. This old engine's fucked, and I think you should pull out. And it was quite the opposite. In actual fact, I was able to close my eyes, so to speak, to the data and allow that to unfold. So, which meant that I got to feel my training. I got to go in and feel how it felt. Really lean into RPE, lean into how certain sessions felt as far as I was concerned. I feel like I'm working hard. I don't feel like I'm working hard, etc. And then report that back to somebody who'd seen the data and see if those married up. And what was really, really interesting from being an athlete as opposed to the coach was it didn't at first. It does more so now, but it's taken a good bit of coaching to allow me to kind of feel that, which was something, again, as a coach I do and see often, but as an athlete I kind of hadn't felt. So that was fun. Example wise, I was chatting to you beforehand about this, but we were running sprints, and it was the usual kind of coming away from the sprints. And how did that feel? Bloody awful! It felt shit. I must have been the slowest sprinter, and all this. I hated it. Clearly, I'm unfit. I should just hang up my hat. And I had my rant, and then Alex said, your data suggests you're running faster than you ever have in the decade I've known you. You're recovering faster. Your aerobic capacity's gone through the roof in the 3 months we've been training. And not only do these numbers say that you can do what you're set out to do, but you probably do it with more ease than you had expected. And not having looked at that data, not having interacted with it, to hear that back, somebody looking at the metrics and knowing me, was massively powerful and also shockingly surprising.
it's it's true though when you stop trying to interpret the data yourself and just let someone look at your data for long enough, to be able to tell you what's what. It also allows you when they tell you to believe them and just be
Yeah.
like, you know what, you're right. Instead of being like, well, I saw the other day my heart rate recovery was 10 beats per minute, not as good as the day before. Like, it just allows you to be like, okay, thanks. Actually, cool. Rad. Um,
It's like the opposite of dietary recall, isn't it? When you ask somebody, "How well are you eating? Tell me about your diet."
yeah,
They'll remember
really good.
yeah, they remember the chicken salad that they had, and the
Yeah,
whatever it might be that they deem to be healthy, and they'll forget the 600 chocolate bars that they ate in between the time, and the bag of chips that they had for breakfast every 3 days. And it's the opposite way around, isn't it? I'm
yeah,
remembering all the crappy things. I'm remembering, as you say, genuinely things like you've just mentioned, like my my recovery heart rate this morning, or my resting heart rate was way higher than I expected. And I remembered that from a Tuesday 3 weeks previous. And I was remembering being ill, as you've mentioned earlier on, and I was remembering all the things that kind of negatively spoke to me.
yeah,
Uh, and they were actually kind of very sporadic points in the data, whereas he was able to remind me, well, yeah, you're pointing out all the negatives, but if you look at the positives, they far overwhelm any of these things, which were really just incidental. And that's powerful, and interesting in equal measure.
yeah. It's interesting especially when you're coming back from injury or illness or anything really, or just getting fitness back, quote unquote, the ways that we can find negative correlations between data points or sensations and ways that we feel and begin to negatively anticipate or how our training is going to be that day and negatively spin how our performance is going to be that day. And we sort of start to self create that scenario, even when we may be well past the point of recovery. We might be perfectly fine. Maybe we just had a shit night of sleep, but it's not, our heart rate isn't weird because we were ill. It's just because we had shit sleep after some alcohol, woke up and had 3 shots of espresso. Like,
Yeah,
it's, those are different things. We're probably still going to be able to perform. Um, but once you go into the training session with the idea that it's not going to go well, and when it starts to feel difficult, your mental headspace is, this feels difficult because I suck, and
yeah,
because this is hard because I'm bad at this, instead of this is hard because I'm pushing myself harder than I ever have in my life, and this
yeah.
is uncomfortable because I am doing something very uncomfortable.
Well, it's exactly as you just said. It's this, you lean into those insecurities and the self doubt that you have, because it's easily within reach all the time. It's just part of human nature, isn't it? Is that those kind of self-critical elements are right in front of you. I suppose it's probably a survival mechanism. If we were just going about happy as Larry, saying, "Yeah, fuck it, the world is beautiful," then the lion's going to get you, isn't it? So you have to be a certain amount of distrust and natural kind of cynicism there. Otherwise, you're in danger. But it's because those things are so close, isn't it? And then you have, I mean, perfect and simple example was, I had pneumonia over Christmas and New Year, briefly in the hospital. It wasn't just throwaway. I was really very ill, uh, and then got back to training. And I think I must have been 10 days back into training, and I was just remonstrating with myself as you've just described. This, I suck. This is shit, and all those fears were lingering. It wasn't even about the illness. It was simply, I'm shit. I shouldn't have made these choices. I feel like a fool. I should probably call it a day. And then I'm sitting thinking, how hard it's going to be to tell everybody, listen, I'm going to give up before this gets any further. And again, a conversation with Alex, and he's like, you remember you were in the hospital like 10 days ago. You have remembered that you had pneumonia, and this is just a sort of recovery process. And also, let's have a look at the metrics. Let's make it a practical and scientific conversation. And immediately you're just like, okay. Now that you've able to sort of turn my head that little bit to 1 degree to the left, I can see the whole thing differently. So coaching. Being coached is a wonderful gift for a coach, I think, and it's been a long time since I kind of really leaned into that and realized that, because it allows you to see the power of what you're able to do, and gives you that kind of strength in yourself to understand. Now I can see why such and such a person might be feeling bad about this, even though I've told them 18 times this is the your deadlift's fine. Stop messaging me. This is fucking ridiculous. And then you think, actually, no, I felt like that just yesterday. So it humanizes you a little bit as well, which has been fun.
Yeah, I think it reminds you again that the power that you have as a coach with your own
Yeah,
clients. Um, and the tremendous, I don't want to say power, but it's true. They when you're an athlete, when you're a client, when you're being coached, you're really outsourcing a lot of control
Yeah,
to someone else, and in doing so, there's a lot of trust, and there's a lot of respect that goes into that relationship, and having someone that you trust and respect who's been seeing you at your worst and seeing you at your best, and have them seeing trends of you improving and then being like, "Hey, you're doing fantastic. You're doing well. Or I'm proud of you." Even when things feel like shit, you're like, "All right, well, if they can see it, even if I can't, it must be there." Like that's so powerful. And like
yeah,
remembering too when you're working with people and they're having difficulty seeing the positives or seeing their progress, suddenly you're like, "Okay, well, I get it.
yeah,
I get it." You know, what how can we reframe? What can we change to make you feel a little bit more successful? Or, what can we talk about together to help you get your head out of your butt, or whatever you're going through right now.
yeah,
Um, it makes you, like you said, it humanizes you a little bit, and I think it's always a nice stark reminder that coaching is, it's about the numbers, and it's about the training, and it's about the programming, but that's probably 50%.
yeah, yeah,
The other 50% is the being a good communicator, a good person, seeing what your person needs emotionally and physically, and being able to make sure that they can get to their race still excited for it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which has been a huge part of the game for me is ensuring that my head stays in the game, that I don't lean into those insecurities. Um, as you've just said, the data and the metrics and the actual performance had to improve. Otherwise I would have been, frankly, I would have been a danger not just to myself but to everybody else. It was a very, very hostile environment out there. So if you're turning up on the start line for something like these unprepared, then you're not just affecting yourself. You're affecting, possibly. Well, I mean, on that particular race, there was a group of 32 started, and then all the support teams, which almost matches in numbers because of the environment. So you have to be in a position where you're fully prepared, which means that the metrics and the performance and all those kind of gauges and numbers and fail safes have to be correct. You have to know that you're ready.
Mhm.
But again, as you've just said, knowing that you're ready isn't, if you showed up completely and utterly super fit and ready to do this, and it was well within your game to do it twice, but you weren't psychologically prepared, and you weren't, you hadn't gone through that kind of battle, or that kind of process yourself to allow yourself to be in a position to deal with that environment, or deal with the all the different things that you might be carrying, then you're just going to fail just as easily. So yeah, both have to be laid out on the table and hammered.
Yes, and I think that would be a great segue for us to move directly into the race itself,
Mm.
what it looked like, what it entailed, and then what it felt like as someone out there doing it. Like, what was your experience out there, and was there a moment where you encountered a day, a thing, an obstacle in your way that wasn't necessarily physically taxing, but just mentally and emotionally draining in a way where if you weren't prepared to suffer, may have really changed the outcome?
Yeah, I can tell you before the race started, when my hardest psychological moment came the night before the race itself, and I guess it's fair to the race to say, and to the organisers to say, that they're very clear that when you arrive in situ, when you're there in the area that you're going to race, you have to consider the race has started at that point. I don't think I got that until afterwards, if I'm 100% honest. I understood what they meant by it from a sort of intellectual perspective, but getting out there and experiencing what I did, I kind of thought, I know why they were drumming this in quite hard. So on uh, I guess T-1, the night before, we were taken a few miles, maybe not even that far, a mile or so from the base camp itself, which was just huts and electricity and hot water and all the rest of it, and given a teepee and some reindeer skin, and that was us. You stay there. That's you. You're gonna sleep under this. This will be unique for you. And I knew that was going to happen, but it didn't. It didn't seem like that would be difficult. Yeah, that would be fun. We'll just sleep under the stars. And two things happened. One was really obvious and practical. It was just the reindeer skin itself. I was on a slight angle in the tent. I had tried to be a nice fella and stayed out the back and let everybody get a nice comfortable position. Thought I'll just manage where I'm left. And I wish now I'd been a bit brutish and said, "Fuck it, I'm sleeping there, and you can all fight me if you want." I ended up with a shit spot on a slight angle, and being on a reindeer skin on the snow, and you end up creating it's like a toboggan. You end up creating a slidey shelf. So every time I laid down, I would slide about 6 foot until I was crushed up against the side of this bloody teepee. So it was horrendous. I had to wrap myself around the pole. At one point, thought about tying a knot around the pole with it. It was that bad. So it
Oh
was
my god.
incredibly uncomfortable. And it must have been minus 20 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that translates as, but very, very cold. Um,
Yeah.
we came out, a moment of wonder, we came out of the tent briefly to see the Northern Lights. I felt like I could reach out and touch them. It was that good. But then went back in, had to get some sleep. And the cold was enough that I had to cocoon myself inside the sleeping bag, completely sew myself in order to survive the cold. But then I became really claustrophobic, which I wasn't aware was a thing for me. But I think because I was overthinking, I was like, God, I'm trapped in here. Oh no, I'm trapped in here, and that became cyclical. And then I needed out, so I'd sort of open an air hole, which would then freeze whatever was poking out the bloody thing, and this became a kind of a backwards and forwards thing. And then I just got it in my head that all those previous fears came and danced around me like specters for the rest of the night. I was just absolutely convinced that I could not do it, and that became this kind of really really hard self flagellation, I suppose, where I was just really really negative. And I got to the point where I made a decision that fuck it, I am wasting everybody's time. I'm going to get up. I'll take a risk and take the mile long walk back to camp, back to base camp, knock on the door and say, I've made a prick of myself. Can I sleep here and go home tomorrow? And I made that decision for real. Got out the tent, got my shoes on, and walked about 200 meters, and then thought, well, I need a pee, so I'll stop and do that first. And then realized it was so bastard cold that it might be bad to try and walk a mile in it. So, so I went back into the tent, still thinking, fuck it, I'll give up in the morning. And then just lay there. So I didn't get any sleep for that whole night. So when I started, the point between that kind of trip out into the cold and then the actual start, I did get to a point where I thought, well, you've come all this way, you've done all that training, you might as well get to the start line, see how it feels, take a few steps, and then make a decision. So I kind of made a practical decision not to waste the opportunity, but still fully convinced that I was going to balls it up. So that was actually genuinely, I'm kind of making light of it, but it was really a really difficult night.
It
Uh,
sounds it. You're just alone. You're alone. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to focus on. You're just in a teepee
yeah,
with your
sliding into a bloody.
worst fears being kept awake. Yeah. No, I mean, and it's that shit that really. I mean, I'm sorry that you experienced that, but it is true. It's always that shit that you don't plan for and you don't prepare for that catches you the most off guard and degrades your confidence in the most profound ways
Yeah,
because there's not a challenge in front of you that you can focus on or do. It is just you in a space in your head waiting, and then you
yeah,
just fill that space with noise. And sometimes that noise is really,
really,
really
yeah,
unfair.
really. There's the right word for it. Really unfair, really negative, really useless. Well, I say that, and I'll take that away immediately because it was useful. I think that having gone through that. Actually it was really really useful. It was kind of I refer back to it now as being kind of a crossing the Rubicon moment. I had to go through that and really really experience that kind of internal terror, and then make that decision. Well, yeah, you feel that way, but you're still going to move forward, mate. And these are the that was the decision ultimately, positively, I did make in the end, that no, you'll move forward and stop when you have to stop, as opposed to stopping when you've just made a soft decision to stop, or a decision based on an emotional decision to stop. And I started the race in relatively good spirits, knowing that I had made that decision and been through a kind of a horrible night in my head. And I don't think anything after that was as psychologically difficult. I think that because I'd been through and I should caveat that with there were very, very horrible moments within that whole whole expedition.
I've
But
heard.
yeah, but nothing that I didn't feel I could cope with. And I am very much of the opinion that probably physically I can deal with quite a lot, but it's always going to be me that gets me in the end. And I had to just kind of beat that down a little bit on the first day, or the night before. And once I had done, I kind of became filled with a certain amount of confidence. And I've said since a good many times that almost literally every step I took forward gave me an extra incremental quarter percentage more confidence, as I broke the back of the first stage of the first day, which I think there's about 5 stages in each day, got to the first checkpoint and met people who were smiling and saying, well done, crack on. That was enough to say, well, I got to the first checkpoint. That's good. All I have to do is get to the next checkpoint. And then I remembered the sort of skill set that I had, which is breaking things down. And I'm very good at taking it in small chunks and giving myself little jobs to do, just sort of discipline training and managing it in that sense. And once I kind of leaned, and remember, again, as you know, it had been a long time since I've done anything like this either. So the rust was heavy, and as I kind of moved, it slowly started to shed a little bit, and I felt lighter and lighter. Uh, Actually, physically as well, I think by the time I got to the end, I felt like I was physically more in control than I might have been at the beginning. So I found my feet, kind of literally. But yeah, it became better and better. But from a real shit start, which means there were days. The first 2 days were brutally hard, really, really
Yeah.
hard.
Weather-wise in the Arctic, like I remember looking at the days and the stages, and there was one day near the end, was it stage 3 or stage 4, um, where you basically had to go straight up a mountain or something. It was like a
That
ton
was
of climbing.
Yeah, that was day two. Actually, that
Okay.
was the hardest physical day. So actually, the way the race panned out, and again, something the organizers had suggested, Chris King had said, was that the race kind of breaks down into two parts. Days 1 and 2 are very, very hilly. On day 2, you're climbing a mountain. Essentially, it's 1,000 meters of gain. But in that terrain, that's kind of crazy to go through. And the weather conditions can they're so fleetingly different on a whim that you can't really prepare for it either. Every time we asked, what's the weather going to be like, they said, well, the last report was such and such, but it's meaningless because it can change on on a coin spin. But we got to day 2. Mount Kabla is the name of the mountain there, and as we got to the first checkpoint, which is really the beginning of the mountain, the first stage was a preamble to get there. Uh, there were a good few more snowmobiles kicking about than was normal, and there was a good few more support teams, people rather, personnel than normal, and that told us something. They were kind of condensed into this area, and really they were just double checking everybody's kit was right, warning them of the danger ahead, and giving you the option to say, "Nah, that sounds shit. I'll call it a day here," which I think somebody did, because we were moving into degrading weather, and the forecast was that it could get up to 30-mile-an-hour side winds, maybe 40, and the temperature would drop to maybe minus 30 Celsius again. And it got worse than that, I think. Again, we never got a kind of a full report back, and then you have to take wind chill into
Yeah.
consideration and all the rest of it. So we're looking at potentially minus 50 in this thing, and you're climbing in snowshoes at minus 50 with visibility of at points less than a meter, which made it really, really tough overall for obvious reasons. Um, but what was hard was that there was no real way of navigating in slightly better weather. As you go up the mountain, there are waypoints every 15 meters or so, and they're great big tall 4 meter high pylon, well, poles that have been, they're there all the time with big X's on them to say, this is important, look at this.
Here.
Yeah, follow this one. And the way it's laid out is if you see an X, it means go straight forward and you'll see the next one, so keep on track. If you see two X's on these poles, it means that, check where you're going because it actually takes a degree's turn to somewhere. But if you've only got 1 meter visibility, A, you might not find that way marker at all, and B, direction means nothing anymore. You can just spin a millimeter out of your or 1 degree out, and suddenly you're going hugely in the wrong direction. So I was obviously concerned about this from a practical perspective. It was going to be really, really difficult. So what I managed to do was find another guy. Actually, he was going in the wrong direction when I found him, so it could have been a bit shit for him.
Yeah.
Found a Dutch guy called Robbie, who became or we became each other's right hand man for the rest of that day. And it was about 7 hours we were moving through this horrendous business. But what we did was, at my suggestion, or it was a really obvious suggestion, that we would walk out as far as I could see him, then he would stop dead. And that left me at the last way marker. Then I could travel to him, he stays where he is, and I would move to the next one. And all the while, he was waiting for me to call him to the next one. He would look back to see where it was I came from. So we created this kind of you go, I go system, and it worked. It was very slow going, and a couple of times we thought we were off track, but it worked really well. It didn't work for everybody though. At one point, I saw a very vague black mark, and it turned out it was less than a meter away, and it was just another dude who'd been ahead of us, standing, shivering like you've never seen before, like a cartoon, kind of hands all over the place. A guy called Rob. What are you doing? And he says, "It's fucking cold, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, it is, mate." And then I looked, and he'd started to take his gloves off, so he was obviously having a hard time and not responding well. So I kind of fought with him to get his gloves back on, and eventually took the decision to press his SOS button, call in the troops. And then I had to say, "I'm not standing here any longer. I've done what I can do, and I have to carry on." So I had to hope that they found him. They did. Moments later, I saw the snowmobiles go past. He lost a toe and 3 fingers that day,
Holy shit.
and he was obviously that was his last moment in the race. Somebody else was found. Actually, Chris told me afterwards that, again, yards from me, he came past in his snowmobile, waved and said hello, and then I wouldn't have known he'd stop moments later, but he did, and he found a girl running in circles, screaming. She had obviously just found herself trapped in nothingness and didn't know what to do. So a few other people lost fingers. There was some snow blindness. There was that poor girl who was relatively hysterical, and then there was people that were just various other kind of cold injuries and things. So we lost 8 people on that, and a few of them to the hospital. And it was just brutal. It was really, really brutal. But getting through that, for those of us that did, I think a third of the field came out that day, and the rest of us that got through that were filled with a kind of a, hopefully not over the top confidence, but enough confidence to think, well, if I can get through that, then the rest should be okay.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it was. So days 1 and 2 were very hilly and undulating and had that mountain to cross. And days 3 and 4 were vast open lakes, frozen lakes. And the trick there was just not losing your mind, because it continues just forever. You can be on these lakes moving for hours, and it genuinely, you look around and it looks like you've got nowhere, and it's quite difficult not to just fall into that and think, clearly I'm shit at this, I'm getting nowhere, this is just, I can't deal with the constancy of it. I think a few people did eventually say no. In fact, there was one girl I remember talking to afterwards who just said she'd had enough, that was it, couldn't bear it anymore. Pulled herself off to the side and made a little pot of soup, which sounded really appealing when she told me that.
Yeah,
So I
it's
was glad I
actually,
hadn't been with her at the time.
yeah, you're like that. I might have done that with you.
Fuck it, yeah, let's just have soup. So the first 2 days were really physically hard, which somehow helps to keep the demons at bay in your head to a certain degree, because I had to very practically deal with every moment. You do this, you do that, kit check, admin check, all this kind of stuff over and over. And working with Robbie, it was a case of communicating openly and, right, you stand here, how you feeling? Only give it 15 seconds. We don't want to, so there's lots of things to keep us busy. Whereas the other 2 days, it was actually a 5-day thing, but breaking it down into 4 days. The last day was kind of a fast, hard day and didn't take quite so long. The second 2 days was just about keeping my head sewn on. But for me, I had found that the first 2 days, again, going back to that kind of increasing confidence, having got through there, I found myself kind of giggling with laughter at some of the things we've discussed. This kind of, how could you be so hard on yourself? Look, here you are, day 3, getting stronger. You're having a
Yeah.
good time. Anytime anybody came past me, I was whistling and high-fiving, singing songs and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, you know, and I'd take things easy as well. The first 2 days, I'd really kind of made sure I sat myself at the back of the pack. I didn't want to burn out. So the only kind of regret or uh, you know, negative thoughts I had were, well, it could have gone faster if I'd not been so fucking caught up in my own shit. But really, it wasn't a consideration. I just wanted to finish the thing as opposed to actually compete. I
Mhm.
think in the end, I came 8th out of a field of 32, but then it doesn't matter. I might even be wrong about that. It became meaningless in the end. So,
It seemed like it was a much more, I mean, obviously the race, it was a race and it obviously was incredibly difficult, but I feel like for you at least, it seemed like it's the first one.
yeah,
And not to, it was extremely difficult and not to sort of downplay what you've accomplished, but it sounds like it almost worked as just a training day for you to get the rust off and get you feeling like yourself again and believing in yourself again and knowing, entering that space of knowing like, oh, when things get very difficult, I'm very good at putting one foot in front of the other and remaining mentally aware, creating plans. And when things become boring, um, I'm very good at focusing on getting to the next step or just doing the work. Um, and it sounds like, knowing what the rest of your year looks like, that was exactly the race that you needed,
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, without a doubt.
physically and mentally.
Both, yeah. I don't think it. I genuinely, and don't want to jinx myself in any way at all. I genuinely don't think it could have gone better. I think even there's that kind of one idea of, oh, I probably could have gone faster. I think if I had gone faster, I might have come into trouble with that. And the fact is, the way that it played out, if I look back on it and said, I'd like to repeat it again and do things differently, I think I'd be making a mistake because everything went really, really well, and I learned all the things you've just laid out perfectly. I learned really well this rediscovery and new skills that I didn't have, and leaning into the fun of it as well. Which I had done on every previous race. I do find the fun really easily, and I like to think that I'm positive and can find the positives, but I hadn't been doing in the lead up to it. I allowed myself to become overwhelmed with the negatives. So the race gave me that back. And as you say, the rest of these races to come, the jungle especially, uh, is so alien, and the terrain is going to be so difficult. And I know that of the 4, this is considered to be the hardest, the one I've got coming up. Uh, I do feel not overly confident, or not absurdly confident. But I do feel much more confident having gotten the Arctic under my belt now, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I don't think I was looking forward to the Arctic. I was looking forward to the idea of completing it, but
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that I was going to get an amazing experience out of it. And that's the bit to really highlight is that for 5 days I got to work hard and march through one of the last great wildernesses on Earth. And sometimes didn't see people for hours and hours. It was just me and planet Earth. And a good friend of mine actually had messaged me before I went, and I was, leaning into this kind of negativity. And he said, one thing he said stuck with me a few times and probably will for good was, remember, it's a privilege, he said. And I thought, God, he's fucking right, isn't he? This is all a privilege. This is,
Yeah.
I can't possibly start whining and moaning and bitching about the fact that I'm getting to go to the Arctic and have an adventure in amongst that. And even the what if it goes wrong? Well, what if it goes wrong? What could, so what? And all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
was revealed to me through that process. I was going to say I'm a little disappointed that I wasn't able to find that beforehand, but that's what these journeys are about, aren't they? I've been there before and I've experienced that and felt those things before, but I'd kind of forgotten and kind of allowed my this cloud of judgment that I'd lived under for a bit, completely created by myself to overwhelm those kind of positive things. And so, yeah, the Arctic gave me that back.
I I think that's excellent. That's all I wanted for you from it. Whether you finished or not, I just wanted you to survive and
Yeah,
have a good
surviving.
time. Survive and have a good time. Um, do you think too in that T minus 1 day, uh, giving yourself the permission to quit, but then realizing that you did want to do it anyway, and knowing that with every step after that, you did have permission to quit, did that help you not quit? Like, rather than thinking that, you couldn't or that someone would be mad at you or that it wasn't an option and you were just stuck there, being like, "I could leave at any time." Did that help you or did that just sort of not become a thought anymore?
It did help. Well, I think that I had to go through all that stuff in order to arrive at pretty much what you're describing, which was this kind of. I kind of touched on it a second ago. This, like, what if I do quit, or what if I fail, or what if all these things, and I eventually arrived at this. Well, what if, and it was a kind of a shrug of the shoulders. I didn't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
That was anything other than so what. It was what if I can't get to the end of it? Do you know who inspired me through it was the children. I've got anybody who doesn't know, I have 4 kids, and especially the youngest two didn't even get what I was doing. And of course they didn't. But the oldest two did get it, but not fully. Poppy, the eldest, she's 14, and then Gabriel's 11. So they understood I was going to kind of a crazy place and all this kind of stuff. Um, but if I was to come back to them and say I didn't even start it, they would say, "Oh, why?" And I would say, "I just didn't feel like I could do it. I got a bit scared." And all the rest of it. Say, "Oh dear!" And then they'd just fucking go about their day. They wouldn't
Yeah.
care, and not because they didn't care what was important to me, but what they would care about is that I was home, safe, as you've just said, and that I loved them anyway. And their love for me wouldn't change in the slightest. And I was able to kind of. I just a moment thinking about the kids, which is an obvious kind of go-to for a dad, but then I was able to kind of bounce off that and then think about people like yourself and people like Alex and think, well, if anybody is to think less of me for making a decision that's entirely mine based on all these things which are also entirely mine, then fuck them.
Right.
So I kind of landed at that point, which you've kind of described well, which is that. So you know what need is there to give up? And I can give up, I could not give up. It's entirely down to me, in which case I might as well just fucking get there and put one foot in front of the other and see if I have to give up.
Mhm.
If I have to give up, at least I've tried myself against this big test.
Yeah.
But if I give up without trying, then that's a decision I've made based on things that I've made up. And
Mhm.
arriving at that was kind of useful, which is why the start line itself was kind of a strangely fun moment, because I thought, well, fucking, it's all or bust now, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
fuck it.
who cares? Yeah.
Onward. Um, no, I love that. It's been a while since I've done anything that's even come close to pushing me in that way, but when I did, Cactus to Clouds for the first time, I did it by myself, and 8,000 feet of climbing, 8 miles, and really rough terrain. And the whole time I was like, I should probably be doing this with someone. I should probably have someone with me. I don't know if I can do this. What if something happens? What if? And the whole night before, I did not sleep. I did not sleep. Not a wink. Nothing but anxiety. And the morning, it was just like, okay, what do I need? I need my fluids. I need my food. I need my shoes. I need my vest. I need my poles. I need to get to the start, and then I need to just start going. And then whatever happens after that, I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
And by the time I made it through the foothills to like 5,000 feet, I was giggling. Like, I was giggling. I was like having the best time. The foothills are the hardest part because it's just like there's nothing pretty to look at. And again, like just a much smaller scale, but it was my first mountaineering thing by myself.
Yeah.
And I just recall getting to the middle, like 5,000 feet, and running into a woman in her 70s and a gentleman and his son. And his son had, I want to say cerebral palsy. and it was his son's 63rd time doing the hike, and it was the 70-year-old woman's 301st time doing the hike.
Suddenly you're smashed with context. Oh my god.
And I was like, this whole fucking first 5,000 feet of climbing, the whole night before, I'm building this thing up in my head as something inaccessible. And I'm building something up in my head as something I can't do that is fundamentally really difficult and like no one can do it. And like, granted, I was moving at a much faster clip than they were, but it was a day hike for them. They'd done it, in that woman's case, 300 times. And I just remember being like, holy shit. Like, the only reason that this felt impossible was because I told myself it
Yeah,
was.
exactly that. Yeah.
And here this woman was just getting her morning hike in, because I guess when you're retired, you just need something to do. Um, and I don't know, just after that, I was so giggly. I was just so like, I don't want to say irreverent because I love that hike so much. It's my favorite on earth. But like, it was so different. Everything after that did not get easier. Obviously, you're getting into altitude now and, you've already traveled up 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 feet. But I've made friends with the guy and we just buddied it all the way through the snowy bit. There's a traverse that's a little sketch and we just were like, "Well, if I fall, can you just try and grab me?" Um, and that's how I got to the top, and it was the most, like, casual, easygoing. I mean, I was in shorts and a t-shirt, um and I remember running into 2 gentlemen who were in full mountaineering gear, goggles, glasses, all of it, like, full gear, and I'm in short shorts and a crop top. I should have brought gloves. That was my major mistake, but, like, I'm in booty shorts on this mountain, and they're, like, bundled, and I almost felt bad because they looked miserable. They'd been out there for 7 hours, and I was on my 3rd, and I just wanted to be like, guys, you should be having more fun. Do you want some candy? Like, do you want some snacks? Like, I actually like just sort of like became their little like guardian angel. I was just like chit chatting with them and like trying to, I don't know, like try and remind them that we were only a mile from the end. Like we're right there. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
They were in that like lost in how long it had taken kind of
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I just think about that night before and being horrified, like,
Yeah.
almost in tears of, like, "I shouldn't be doing this by myself," like, "Oh my god," and then, running into a 70-year-old woman halfway up, and she's just like, "Oh, yeah, this is my morning hike.
Damn
Fuck.
it.
What have I done?" Um, to myself, but also just the relief and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
joy that followed that, like, sudden realization that it was only as difficult as I made it out to be, and I
Well,
I was
there's
prepared for what I was doing.
yeah, yeah, exactly that. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, that I mean, a perfect example, really, of how we can frame what I've been talking about in the Arctic, and it's exciting because it's the Arctic, and you can paint a lovely picture around that and all the rest of it. But it's ultimately exactly the same thing you've just described: is that something ahead of you that you've told yourself you can't do based on nothing but fear and doubt. And then you've told yourself 1,000 times until it's like a drill through your own head. Can't sleep and all the rest of it. And then you go out and do the bloody thing. And afterwards, you look at it and think, yeah, it was hard. Yeah, there was difficult parts. Yeah, there was a certain amount of suffering that went on through it. But look what it's given me. An interesting part of it is that I think it's perishable. I certainly have that kind of capability to do that, to manage that. So the next time you go, if you were to do something like catch the clouds, and then a month later you do something not dissimilar, and a month later you do something that challenges you, you would get used to that kind of that dressing room fear, because I used to get it when I was fighting. You would get that kind of moment beforehand where you think, this guy's just going to kick my head straight off my shoulders. Why am I doing this? I'm
This is
not
gonna
used.
hurt so bad.
I've been getting away with this the whole time. I've been lucky up to this point. And you would get all these ideas in your head and then go through and perform to your training, and do well or not, but still come out having not had your head kicked off. But the same applies with this, doesn't it? Is that if you train for these things and you push yourself through things, and there's no need for anybody to do anything as extreme as some of the things that we might be describing. It could be as simple as getting to the gym, or and we've described it before in different contexts and different circumstances, is that some of the reason we like to do these things openly and publicly is so that people can say, well, yeah, I'm not going to do 4 mad extreme ultra marathons in a year, but I have been putting off climbing the local mountain or the local hill, or doing that trail run, or running the 5K with my pal who keeps saying give it a go, or starting a jiu-jitsu class, or whatever it might be, because I've told myself I can't, and because I'm scared of that initial sort of environmental moment of, oh god, this is overwhelming.
Yeah.
But once you do it, the next thing's easier, the next thing's easier, and you become kind of the master of your own destiny a little bit more. And uh, although I don't think that I had forgotten all of that, because there are things that I'm still doing day to day that challenge me, but in that particular way, I had come to believe that I was incapable, or come to tell myself at least. So those nights, the night that you had and the night I had, when you look back on it, it is a gift, isn't it? It is something that you can kind of lean into and go, well, that tells me something about how powerful my mind is,
Mhm.
and something about how powerful the event was in my mind. Yet there I was able to do it, and then you can feed that back into the day to day stuff. Having had layoffs from the gym, you can go back again, something we discussed off air. You can go back and tell yourself that you can't do a certain thing. I can't deadlift 400, or I can't put X over my head, or whatever it was that might have been something that you were proud of being able to do. And you might find you go in the first time you try, you're a bit rusty. Second time, and you're only percentile points away from it, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's right there in front of you, and you know that a certain amount of consistent training will be right there again. But you can easily tell yourself you're weak and useless by not going.
Yeah. And not just putting yourself out there, and honestly getting the first failure out of the way, or
Yeah,
the first little mind fuck, just getting it out of the way. And I love what you said too about knowing that you are prepared, and having the training, um, you know, no matter what you're undertaking, knowing that you're prepared for whatever's going to happen, um, or prepared to deal with something, that may happen.
yeah,
And for you out there, having the right kit, having the training behind you, knowing that the metrics were in place, knowing you could physically get yourself from point A to point B, and then it was just a matter of doing it.
yeah,
Um, Knowing you had the food, the gear, the everything. That's also a huge piece of the relaxation and the confidence. And and I think, going to something that's big or that's scary, rather than when you think of the thing that you don't have or that you're not doing, and that's the reason why you can't do the thing, becoming a little bit more process oriented and being like, well, what if I was a person that did this? Or what if I was a person that had that thing? What would that look like? The only reason I'm not trail running is because I don't have trail shoes. Well, why don't I just go get some fucking trail shoes and go? Like,
Cool, man.
like,
That's that.
why am I putting this obstacle in front of myself?
It's that jujitsu example we always hear. I say jiu-jitsu, you probably hear it in lots of different places, but it's the one that appeals to me as funny because I've heard it so many times. It's like, yeah, I'm going to start jiu-jitsu. I'm just going to get fit first. You hear about the gym, don't you? I'm
Yeah.
going to go to the gym, but I want to just get myself in a little bit better shape first. Well,
Hmm.
why would you just not go to the gym then?
That's what
Or
the gym's for.
yeah, go to jiu-jitsu. That's the way you're going to get good at jiu-jitsu. If you
That's
can
what it's
still,
for.
exactly, yeah. So, but it's easy to put those things in place, and easy to justify it. But
Yeah.
what it requires at some point is you take that first step, and it could be as simple as fucking googling, then pressing add to cart on a pair of bloody trail shoes. And
Yeah.
that can be such a hard bridge to cross, though, can't it? Because then you're telling yourself, oh, now I have removed an excuse. Now I have removed, and I'm one step closer to having to do it. Which is, again, is why the sometimes being, and it doesn't have to be publicly accountable, but being accountable to people, even to a coach, becomes really, really useful, because you're saying, yeah, I'll do these sessions. Yeah, I'll perform to the level that we both agree I can perform to, and I'll
Hmm.
report back and all the rest of it. And we know that some folk aren't compliant in that sense, and sometimes it's because they're scared to be so, because it tells them that they could, but now they're going to have to try harder, and so
Yeah.
the
It's scary.
principle spins, doesn't it?
It's terrifying realizing that you could be pretty fucking good at something, but you're gonna have to keep working really hard.
Yeah,
Um, and also, you also introduce the idea of letting yourself down, letting people down. Um, Suddenly, you have something to lose, so it is much easier to never give yourself the opportunity to fail, or never give yourself the thing to lose in the first place. It's much easier to just be like, well, I don't even want it, and it's not for me. When in reality, it's desperately all that you want, but you're just so terrified that once you get it, you don't know what you'll do if you lose it.
yeah,
And I think that's also something that I love about the events that you've chosen too, is that they involve travel, and they involve doing things, and they involve going places, and it's not just run X miles.
yeah,
Um, there's really just this like strong sense of adventure in it, and there's so much opportunity for fun and exploration. And like you're saying, it's such a privilege to be out there doing these things with your body and getting to see all these places. It's like you said, there's how could you possibly let anyone down? There's nothing. It's just it's totally self-invented.
yeah,
You're just out there doing a thing.
yeah, yeah.
I always say
Or
like,
the alternative is to not do the thing, and there, it's like when you, if you were to sit back and objectively look at that, you say, well, you can sit at home and go to the local park with the dogs like you have been doing for the past X amount of time. Yeah, you can go to the gym, you can keep fit, and
yeah,
you can work on the illusion that your body looks good if that's what you want to, whatever. Or you could work a little bit hard and you could go visit the Arctic, the jungle, the fucking moon, wherever
yeah,
you wherever you're pointing yourself at, and even the pointing yourself at something is the adventure. Now,
mhm,
now when I'm training, and certainly through that 4 or 5 months that we had, I think a little less actually, but in the lead up to the Arctic, training was no longer going to the gym in order to stay fit. It was now every step, every training session, everything that we did and pondered afterwards was based on the adventure that you've just described. And so therefore, even going to the gym had a different kind of edgy hardness to it, a flavor that was kind of slightly metallic. Maybe I
if
was
I
being,
fail this session, what does this mean?
yeah,
If I
yeah. And so immediately you're on that adventure because you've committed yourself to it. And I
Yeah.
think, I think certainly for me, the lease of life, and the reconnection with something that I had definitely lost, only in the sense that, or that I'd put down, that I'd kind of put on the shelf somewhere. Reconnecting with that, and reconnecting with that sense of adventure
Mhm.
has definitely spilled over into everything that I'm doing. Um, it's a busy time. There are other things going on. There are things in my private life going on, which means the bandwidth isn't always managed well. But for the most part, I think things are pointed positively at something daily now, and that's exciting. It's fun.
I don't know where to go from there because that's exactly I love it. Like I love it. Yeah, I think you and I think very similarly about these things, but I don't know. I'm just excited to see how you feel in the jungle because I know it's going to be. You said very alien. You
Yeah,
spent days on Nevis. You've spent days on a snowing mountain. You know what that feels like.
yeah.
Um, but a jungle is something else, and I think it's kind of like knowing that you're the sort of person who can triage, knowing you're the sort of person who can make the decision, look at available options, no matter the environment that you're in. That's still Johnny. That's still you.
I'm hoping so.
And yeah, I guess the adventure really is seeing how it happens
Yeah,
and what it looks like, um, and that trepidation of not knowing what it's going to look like because you know it's probably going to be used. You just don't know like where. So I think it'll be fun to see if the novelty of the jungle almost reduces the anxiety in certain ways because it's like, well, this is new, so I've no preconceived notions of how I'm gonna do with this. It's just I don't know.
cool.
Or
I think that's the jungle's probably the one. that scares me the most in the. But strangely now, before we took on any of these, before the Arctic, which was obviously race number one, I would look at them all, and people would say, which one frightens you the most? And I would try and kind of logically break them down and say, well, the terrain in the Arctic is going to be really, really hard, and there's going to be sort of certain parameters you can't stop for all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Things that the absolute extreme cold can do to you. Or people know that stuff. Maybe not physically, maybe haven't been there, but it's something that people understand. The one that, as you said, that again, let's jump out of that. The mountains, the mountain range in Tian Shan, which is supposed to be about being very remote, and there's a lot of altitude and all the rest of it. In a sense, as you said, Nevis and Scotland and the things that I've done here, I can kind of extrapolate out and think, well, I've been very cold. I've managed, I know how to operate in the snow and the cold and all the rest of it. This is just longer and colder, so there's a little bit of expectation which was met. I wasn't shocked. There was different things. It was a drier cold. Scotland's kind of very wet cold, which is actually colder. Funny enough,
Yeah.
I have felt colder here than most of the time I felt in the Arctic, and I think that's
Hmm.
something to do plus kit and all the rest of it. The mountain range, it's extreme, but I've been up and down. I enjoy the mountains. I know the mountains well, and I'm good in the mountains, so I expect to do relatively well there, but be challenged by just the extreme nature of it. The desert, I expect to be brutal, but it's like a long, long, hard, dry run. It's quite flat for the most part, so it's just going to be about surviving. Whereas the jungle is there's so many variables there that I can't even kind of factor in mentally. That, as you said, I've been through all these permutations in my head and think, how am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? And all I can do is, as you said a minute ago, kind of lean into the training, lean into the practicalities, lean into learning as much as I can before I go, write up my ABC through Z list of what can go wrong. Right, we'll
Yeah.
drop to this one. Prepare as much as I can, and then just go out there and fucking take it on the chin and just do as much as I can. And I think that if I give myself over to the idea that it's all fresh, brand new, and a certain part of me has to remember that these are organized events that if it goes tits up, how tits up can it possibly go? At
Yeah.
some point somebody's likely to help me. So
Yeah.
even if
Yeah.
it goes really bad, I'm probably not gonna die in the jungle. I might just not be very well for a bit. So you
Yeah.
can almost kind of lie into that and just think, well, fuck it, it's all going to be fun. It's all going to be an adventure. And as long as I remember that and remember to adapt to the things that are actually momentarily difficult, then how can I not succeed? Even if I don't finish the thing, it's, as we said earlier on, it's a case of getting there and absorbing as much as I can.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe you're gonna fall in love with the jungle. Maybe you're gonna be Jungle Johnny, and you're gonna
Knowing,
want to
knowing
move.
what I know about myself, though, that's the one thing as well with the heat.
Yeah.
I'm hot here in my front room. This is fucking ridiculous. And so that's going to get me. That's going to get me. I am as Scottish as they come. My skin is so pale, it's blue. So fucking going to the jungle is going to be, and it's not just hot. It's going to be humid. So
Yeah.
let's
So what you're
hope.
saying is send you a care package of bug spray and sunscreen.
Yeah, and salt.
Yes, I could do that. I could do that. Oh my god. Well, Johnny, it was amazing talking to you. Thank you so much. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Um, I would happily, but I don't want to for your sake. How can people find you on social media, Instagram, things like that? What is your, where are you in the world?
Easiest place to find me at the moment is at Jonathan Pain on Instagram. Uh, I think you can type in Jonny Pain, Jonny Pain, and get the same thing. But it's actually the handle's at Jonathan Pain. And as ever, through CHP, you come to CHP and hit me up there, and we can have a chat through those. If any of this excites you, then you're an idiot.
Uh, Type A fun.
Yeah, exactly. If
It's a type.
Yeah, there is definitely a type of fun. I don't know what type that is, but yeah,
Yeah.
the usual places. Instagram's easy. Instagram or hit you up or whatever, and I'm easy enough to find. And don't bite too hard.
Thank God. No, Johnny, this has been excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, your experience, and as always, doing so in a way that is so humble and so relatable. that sometimes I forget how fucking crazy what you just did was. So thank you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to talk. It's been a long time since you and I have talked directly as well, which is so it makes it double fun for me. But always great to come on and spend some time. Thank you.
Thank you.